first of all, I want to say, we had a surprising thing that happened to us in the music industry, which Ozzy passed away. And,
yeah, that came a bit as a bit of a shock.
A bit of a shock. Our segment, our topic today was about DJs, music DJs, and how they played an important role in our life. Or somewhere down the line, even if you weren't a fan of listening to the radio, there's a path where these DJs played an important role on music in general, whether it be through interview or comedy. Howard Stern was a DJ, right? So that's kind of what I kind of wanted to talk about today. Like, what kind of roles did radio play for you guys or DJs in general?
The first thing I'll say is, just on the topic of Ozzy, is, we'd be remiss not to at least mention it. He was such an iconic figure beyond just being a musician or a songwriter. He positioned himself in so many aspects of pop culture. As we were talking about earlier, it was basically reborn when the Osbournes came out.
Yes.
And that exposed him to an entirely new world of people who had never listened to Black Sabbath or Ozzy's stuff. But, here's a guy who really was a trendsetter. Sabbath considered to be one of the 4 bands that started heavy metal. And he took what could have been his greatest defeat, which was when he was fired from Black Sabbath, went out solo and was even bigger on his own.
Right.
And now you can't ignore the effects of his wife and manager, Sharon Osbourne, in that whole mix, because she was the genius behind so many of the things that happened.
Yes.
But I know that you people who are watching this, it's going to be a couple of weeks past that Ozzy's been gone, and everybody in the media is talking about it. But I just wanted to say that, the Osbournes were always very good to me. I had some interactions with them, and I have nothing but positive things to say. Yes. And I loved seeing them play live. I've seen them both alone and with Sabbath, and I'm really glad that he got the chance to do that last show.
Yeah, me too.
And you could see how much it affected him to be able to go up there one last time and play those songs.
Yeah.
And also to see the absolute love and adulation he was getting from his peers. Everybody looks at Sabbath and Ozzy as an influence.
For sure.
So,
I wanted to say I wasn't really prepared to talk about him, because I'm going to get choked up just thinking about it, because it's a whole nother story of why that I'm really close to the Ozzy camp and everything. Music's my whole life, of course, and my first album that was introduced to me by my cousin, who's passed, was Black Sabbath, and and then my first rock show was an Ozzy show. I just wasn't prepared to get emotionally involved in talking about that, and I know that wasn't our big subject, but this being so fresh and trying to be organic about everything, it's dumb not to mention it. And
thank you for all your music, Ozzy, and rest in peace. So,
thank you.
And I do want to give you guys the chance to have your moment with Ozzy. My moment with Ozzy came when he became a pop icon, in the sense of becoming more culturally relevant across genres.
Yeah.
I was not a heavy metal guy, and I found that the heavy metal artists were very, very good at being heavy metal artists. And we know, with Black Star, with what's his name? Black Star Riders.
Oh, with Ricky.
With Ricky. The star, the person who's on stage, is always a star. They always have that rock look and all that. And Ozzy somehow was the only one I knew that shook it, that somehow was able to get rid of that rock look, even while he was all rock.
Yeah, we found out that Ozzy was a family guy, right? Like he had family, and he loved dogs, and
And he had kids
and
or
he-
something,
and
you
it was
know?
just-
And he
he was
runs
a-
around calling himself the Prince of Darkness.
Yeah, it was like that was awesome.
Yeah.
That's
I think that's what one of the things that made Ozzy in the end so remarkable.
Well, right. He's got like our rock genre, and then the pop culture.
He
and
became
he-
culturally relevant.
Yeah, and there's people like, oh, Ozzy, he passed away. Love Ozzy. I don't know his music, but I love Ozzy. You know, I've heard mothers say that. you
Yeah,
know, and,
really fascinating, and
yeah.
and I think it's a tribute, and clearly to his wife and the influences that were there, but a remarkable life
Yeah.
lived.
And, you know, one of my first ever experiences hearing Ozzy was I grew up in a small town in Alberta in Canada. Now, not to disparage the musical taste of the people that I lived with, but it was primarily either pop or country and western, two genres that never really resonated with me. But on special nights, if the air was clear and I tuned to the right station on my radio, I could pick up one of the stations from Seattle all the way out there in Medicine Hat, Alberta. And I would get a taste of what you're talking about today. I never listened to the radio in my town because I didn't like those genres.
Oh, wow.
So I don't have any experience growing up with DJs. My first experiences were that one voice that came from Seattle on those nights would waver in and out, and I would hear, you know, the ads for Ozzy coming to Seattle to play and things like that, and I just went, wow, what's that? But for me, if you want to talk DJs,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there was a program called In the Studio. Do you remember that show?
In the studio. Why
was-
does it sound familiar?
Well, it was a syndicated radio show by Westwood One where a radio station, any radio station, could basically subscribe to this service.
Right.
And they would get a set of CDs every week, and it would have a show, professionally recorded, focusing on one artist or even one artist's album. And one of the main DJs that they had was this guy named Redbeard.
Oh, of course. I
And-
forgot. Okay, so Redbeard's, that was the
In
word
the
it came
studio,
from.
yeah.
But, yeah, that's right, in the studio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we would get that.
Okay.
And so
And that's kind of what my topic, why I wanted to pick this topic, because I know that you were having, you guys had problems getting the stations in Canada.
yeah.
And
well,
I
and
wanted,
that I didn't listen to them. So.
Well, yeah, but you did eventually. Like you knew who Redbeard was, right?
Well, yeah, because I knew that show would come on Sunday nights at 6
Right.
o'clock, and I would always tune in for it.
Right.
And
Were you familiar with Redbeard?
I was not, no.
Oh, okay.
But the
Bob
thing that-
Coburn, maybe.
I mean, vaguely.
Okay.
I can't really speak to this.
All right.
But the thing about Redbeard and why I liked him was here I was, this young guy who was really getting into music. And first of all, he interviewed the bands that I liked, and he seemed to really be knowledgeable about them. So I started building almost like a kindred spirit with him, like, oh, he's asking the questions I would ask if I was sitting there with Megadeth or if I
Right.
was sitting there with Alan Parsons or whoever, So he was the first one. And I think I would be remiss not to include, even though it's not technically DJs, but when Much Music came to Canada, which is what Much Music was Canada's equivalent to MTV.
Right.
And they had VJs as opposed to DJs. And those people, we were so taken with Much Music, as I'm sure most people were taken with MTV when it came out,
right.
that they became part of your life. They became celebrities on their own. The VJs who were, I remember one of the main VJs on Much Music later in his career went on to become the nightly news anchor on the Canadian National News. And it was just such a switch,
Right. Right.
But I know that you, growing up in Los Angeles and the plethora of radio stations here, and you growing up in the East Coast there, where you had a plethora of radio stations, that DJs had more of an effect.
Yeah, your
On
city,
two of you.
Your city was Philadelphia?
Well, my city was many cities.
Oh, well, I mean, as far as listening to radio.
So when I was young and I grew up as a teenager and things like that, we had a local radio station which was very, toast, milk toast, and everybody listened to it because it was local. But we really would try to get the New York stations, but one station that came through was this 93.3 out of Philadelphia.
Okay.
And at the time, it was this new world of radio because, I mean, we can talk about the Alan Freeds of the world and their influence on
Sure.
radio, but in the end, part of this new push involved these DJs that had an artistic component. They were inventing something. And I remember a guy named John DeBella who really invented a lot of music. And I would imagine that there were a handful of people. You probably had, Cleveland and other big music towns, but somehow in Philadelphia became this guy. And I think he invented getting the lead out.
Oh, wow.
Which was the noon thing where they would play 3 Zeppelin songs, and there were so many things
show
that came
carried
out.
over to Los Angeles.
Carried over everywhere.
Yeah.
All of a sudden,
Getting the lead out.
You'd get the lead out.
Yeah. It's like 12-1 or something.
Yeah, it was, and it was a lot of this was John DeBella, and how they would have Grateful Dead 20, 10 hours, whatever. And John DeBella was that guy. He just pushed out music, and he invented the taste of that generation.
Okay.
And so that's some thoughts on where I was. I also was in Boston. It's worth mentioning a couple of those Boston people at some point here, but DeBella was a rock guy, and it was impressive. It was very impressive to watch that happen.
But I'm not trying to be all about myself here, but yeah, growing up in L.A., I was born in '71, so L.A. radio was. That's all we had as far as like getting to know listen to new music and stuff like that, and that was my thing. I lived off listening to these DJs, and I literally I had they had interviews with people like rock. Redbeard and stuff, and I would call in and sit hours on the phone, never get through. I had Bob Coburn. I actually got through to a Roger Waters interview, and I got cut off by accident. And it was just, I was a kid. But I won so many freaking tickets, on radio. A lot of my concerts growing up, they were all free from just listening to the radio so much, knowing when to call and how long it takes to get through, and it was a big deal for me, like Jim Ladd and all.
Well, Jim Ladd actually holds a special place for me because I moved to Los Angeles in 2000, and when I first moved here, I didn't have a television, I didn't have any of that stuff. I just had a little 1-bedroom apartment, and at night when I was going to sleep, I found this radio station, and there he was, Jim Ladd. And
that was at KLOS, right?
Yeah, and he was so knowledgeable about music and the way he would talk about it.
He was the one that was trying to start freeform radio, and that's pretty much why he went to satellite radio, because he just, he tried and tried. He was probably the most productive on getting that across without commercial play and all that stuff. But
I remember I got to meet him once, and I was working with Motorhead, and the Guitar Center here in town, they have this in their office or their store on Sunset.
The Hollywood Guitar Center.
Yeah, they get rock stars to put their impressions into concrete.
I worked there for 8 years, so I'm pretty familiar.
But they were doing it for Motorhead.
I used to mop those things in the morning at 5 a.m.
And Motorhead was, they did the thing with the concrete, and then they played a show at the Whiskey to celebrate that. And Jim was there, and he was kind of like the announcer for the show. And I was like, he was a rock star as far as I'm concerned. I remember being nervous when Lemmy introduced me to him, and I was like, "You're Jim Ladd. I love your stuff."
Oh, I was there. I was actually. It's funny because I worked at Guitar Center Hollywood for many years, and I got to be a special part of the Rock Walk, and I was operations at the time, so I would actually have to get there at 5 or 6 in the morning before they did the Rock Walks and have the guys do a hot mop over the handprints and make sure everything was clean and it was roped off so no one can walk on them, and I don't know. All I could say back in the day, I think there was a lot of blow going on because everyone would go into a room with newspaper on the wall, and they'd all come out all right, we're ready to go, and and they would do their thing. And I actually got to see Ozzy do the Randy Rhoads with Dolores Rhodes, Randy Rhoads' mom. Mm-hmm. They did the Randy Rhoads tribute there. Mm-hmm. Yngwie Malmsteen was there, and I mean, there was a lot of people. I can't remember half the people that were there, but a lot of artists were there. But it was Hollywood Rock Walk. But that's actually funny because I remember Jim Ladd doing a segment on that, and he was just sitting there. It was the Motorhead one, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What impressed me about Jim and why he also holds an additional little special place in my heart is that he would take certain things that I had totally passed over. Like I remember one night driving home late from work, and Styx, a band that I had loved from the 70s and had loved many of their early albums, but hadn't really kept up with them over the last couple of decades. But they had kept making records, and he says, I'm going to have Styx in the studio, and have you heard this new record of theirs? It's so amazing. And he would talk about various songs and everything. And just his passion about that record was enough to influence me to go the next day and buy it because I wanted to hear what he was so excited about. And I think that almost defines what a great DJ was all about.
Tom Petty wrote a song about him, the last DJ.
I had heard that, yeah.
And he actually was inspired by Jim Ladd to create his own radio show.
And what didn't you tell me that he was on? Was he on the album, or did he just do the tour with Roger Waters on Radio Chaos?
He was actually on the album, and the whole concept of the album was Jim Ladd was an LA DJ, and this kid that was spastic, or he had no arms or legs, or no arms, and with a broken off paintbrush, he was able to tap into like war games, but he was influenced by Jim Ladd's DJ. He loved rock, so he was able to communicate through computer, and he was able to control things and show Jim Ladd that he can go above his desk and blow out his lights as he's in the middle. But anyway, Jim Ladd was on the show with this. When you walk into the concert, Roger Waters' concert, he was up, had his own fake DJ booth, and there was a telephone booth, in the middle of the show, and you can actually call and make requests when you walk in. And Jim Ladd's, this is Chaos Radio, and we got Jimmy on the line. Jimmy's down there in the concert going, hey Jim, man, I love you. And then he's like, I want to hear some Rush. He's all right, this one goes out to Jimmy, and he would play Rush. But I digress. But
I just remember I was on some long road trip somewhere when I heard the news that he'd passed away, and I was legitimately sad. I was very upset about that.
I was a huge fan. I listened to him all the way up to his death, and I knew he was sick, but I didn't know. It was kind of like the whole Ozzy thing was just like, whoa, where'd this come from?
Yeah.
But great DJ. I got to meet him. It was an honor.
But of the earlier DJs, I mean, there were some DJs who became so well known that they transcended being a DJ. Like the biggest one I can think of, even though I've never heard him do a DJ session in my life, was Wolfman Jack.
Rock and roll yourself to death. Oh, mercy, give me some more.
I mean, he became so big that he was on variety shows, he was on different television shows, and I knew who he was, even though I never have heard any of his shows. Another one, when Weird Al Yankovic started becoming such a big deal with his early albums, and he kept referencing this guy, Dr. Demento, which I had no clue who Dr. Demento was.
Right.
But I certainly learned a lot more about him afterwards, just because it was obvious that he was a big influence on this artist who I liked. So.
Right. Well, are you familiar with like pirate radio, where they actually had to go out and to see and broadcast
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's been the movie Pirate Radio.
I've
was
seen it.
right.
Yeah.
a great one.
So let's talk about that, because I think that's how Wolfman Jack got his claim.
Yeah,
to
he did
fame.
from Mexico or something, right?
Yeah, because that was how they got freeform radio back then. They were so strict on things, and pirate radio, right?
You got to have a strong transmitter for that, though, right?
Yeah.
Well, you have to have a transmitter. But I mean, I before we switch, I mean, pirate radio is one thing. It didn't have a massive influence as much as the stuff that was happening inside the
But
inner
a
cities.
lot of those DJs, to get their point across, had to go through that to get their like Wolfman Jack, I think, was a part of the.
But you're talking about personalities and whether you're transcending, because ultimately Wolfman Jack did transcend as the voice of DJs on many movies and
Yes.
things like that.
Well, I'm just talking about before he got there. That's what he had to go through.
Yeah, Ryan Seacrest, and
Good one.
talk about transcending the position. I mean, there were those that didn't.
As soon as you said his name, I don't even think of him as a DJ anymore,
No, he's way beyond a DJ. And you have people who didn't, like Casey Kasem and stuff like that. They did not transcend radio. They were radio. And I have stories about Kasem and stuff like that because of my other part of my life.
Rick Dees?
But you're talking about the reason why they're transcending is because you have a personal relationship with these people. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that happens with the personal relationship is you build trust. And when you build trust, then they have the ability to actually talk to you as if you're right there in the room and make suggestions. And in a lot of ways, that's what the power of these DJs was the ability to influence us because they gave us, they could only fit however many songs into an hour.
Right.
Right.
And so, I mean, we can go in so many different directions, but the value of payola, there was positive there, and payola never actually went away. It never, the ability for these DJs to then have to make decisions about what songs they were going to play, and then those songs became iconic for what America had.
Right.
Because there was only room for, let's say, 20 songs in an hour. Billy Joel complained about that, when he tried to do a 5-minute song, and The Entertainer, which was Piano Man, I guess, but songs were not making the radio. Harry Chapin couldn't get a song to save his life on the radio and things like that because
Stairway to Heaven, they wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
No, and these DJs, they took huge risks because they knew that when you went more than 3 minutes, that they lost commercial time.
Exactly.
And they had factored in their financial. So you had a model that was sitting out there, and they had to figure out what they were going to pitch.
Right.
But then they also had to figure out how they were going to make money and deal with the bosses at the radio stations that needed to actually bring money in. And, and there was a balance. And the way Queen, for instance, snuck in 2 songs.
Yeah.
That when they couldn't.
We are the champions, and we will rock you, right?
They snuck in the second song because they knew they could only get one song in that play, but if they put them so close together on the album, radio couldn't help but figure out how to get both those songs in together.
It's quite genius when you think about it.
What a crazy scenario. But I guess what I'm saying is that we became friends with these people in so many different ways, and had we not done that, music would simply not look like it does.
Absolutely.
So many places you would hear that voice and you knew you were listening to the guy who gave teenagers their soul. And, incredible moments
Right.
in what created the fabric of American society.
So, as I said earlier, I moved to LA in 2000 and there suddenly was radio stations that interested me. So I started getting exposed to some of these DJs. And there's a definite subclass of DJ that we've talked about, DJs that become famous enough that they kind of transcend just being a DJ.
Right. And just kind of what he was talking about, like, how you had the commercials and they had their certain time. I was actually I actually Googled why Jim Ladd left FM radio, and what came up was Jim Ladd took his satellite not for money but for freedom. That's why he was just like,
That's what Howard Stern did too.
Yeah, it wasn't about the money. It was all about the freedom to be who he was, and that's what he fought for.
But my point was that there was another subgenre of DJ that I discovered only by living here, and that was celebrities who had made their name somewhere else suddenly being allowed to become DJs. Like I remember, it's actually you are responsible for this directly. For those of you who don't know, when I first met Sean all those years ago, we were neighbors, and on Sunday mornings he would always have his garage open. He'd be tinkering around in his garage, and he'd be cranking his radio. And that's where I got exposed to shows like Breakfast with the Beatles, and also, but more to the point, you would play Henry Rollins' show.
Yeah.
He had a radio show.
Yeah.
You would play Jonesy from the Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
He had his own show. And so these guys, because of their fame in other avenues, were allowed to, flex their DJ muscles, as you were.
Right.
And they were great shows too. But there was a circumstance where you had somebody who had already built a relationship with, and was now basically letting you tiptoe through their record collection with them, saying, "Let me play you this, let me play you that."
Yeah.
And it was a different experience than just having a DJ.
I've been doing that. Listening to shows on Sundays since I want to say I was 16, and it started out with Breakfast with the Beatles. I was born, I'm 54, so do the math. But I'm still addicted to that feeling. Like Sunday to me is no TV. It's all about radio. Thank God we have satellite now, because I can listen to Slim Jim Phantom. I can listen to whoever.
Another example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, Slim Jim. I listen to him, and then I still listen to Breakfast with the Beatles. My wife hates it, but she tolerates it. She gets it. But I have to listen to Beatles. I've been listening to Beatles every Sunday since I was a kid, and I just made it a tradition. And it just makes, I don't know what it does. It kind of it's like rehydrating my body a little bit throughout the week. That's how I look at it,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that that those were special moments, and I think that again, back to the fabric of American society, gathering around the radio has always been a thing.
Yeah.
And radio has changed. I have YouTube radio and things like that, but all that was sort of the future. It's still radio is still the majority how most Americans get their music.
Wow.
And but it's amazing how many of these bands would never have existed. The word of mouth wasn't good enough unless somebody heard the band first.
Right.
And so the relationship with radio was actually how we were introduced.
Right.
And just to
That's all shot now, though. That's all streaming, right?
well, I hope not. We have to find trust somewhere.
Right.
And so I think that YouTube's algorithms have do something in terms of getting us. It's a selection based on recommended lists that follow a pattern of what other people may like, and if you like this, you like that. But before we get there, I do think it's worth mentioning Gene Shea, David Dye, and Michaela Majun from XPN. And this was a little tiny radio station out in, actually, was it Boston? XPN may have been the Philly one, but there's also a Boston one. Anyway, now I'm confused in terms of which city, because one of them was Emerson Radio. And what was happening was that these three people, who to me are otherwise normal nerds, just average people like me, became fans of a genre, and then they brought that genre to the world. And in cities like Boston, cities like Philadelphia, they were helping to pick the music that was actually hitting the clubs in that area. So the singer-songwriters. And so these DJs essentially invented the people who we were watching. And for years and years later, that's when you watch Grey's Anatomy and you watch all these different movies, you're seeing the people that these few DJs picked to be the voice of that music. And I think that carries over to all genres. While those guys are singer-songwriter and folk, there are DJs that actually played a massive role in picking the music that became who we were.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I was much more aware of, in my younger days, of the music coming out of England. And there were a couple of major players in that field there. I mean, John Peel was a tastemaker. I mean, if he plucked your band out of the ether and gave you his attention on his show, you were just about made to be golden. So much so that the live sessions that were recorded in his studio started becoming a record series later on. You know, it was always the John Peel sessions where bands would go in and perform on his show. And the other one was the Old Grey Whistle Test with Whistlin' Bob, their DJ. He was also a tastemaker. You know, he would pick the bands that were up and coming in the clubs and venues in England and give them a much wider forum and break them out. I mean, you think about bands like Dire Straits and Thin Lizzy and various other ones that Whistlin' Bob was instrumental in getting them underway. I was lucky enough to meet him. A few years ago when I was working with Thin Lizzy, they were celebrating 40 years of the Old Grey Whistle Test, and so the BBC was running a week-long series of shows, and they asked Thin Lizzy to come on and perform some songs, so we got to hang out with Whistlin' Bob, and he and his wife are just the nicest people, but I got to sit down with him for about for about 20 minutes, and just the wealth of music knowledge that this guy has, it would take years to absorb it all. I mean, but he was just so passionate, even this far along the chain, about music and about new music, that it was inspiring to me. You know, I always looked to these guys as to what they were excited about, because I would give that a chance. So.
Right.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you compare that against payola, because now, again, I there were pros and cons to the music business and how it was choosing its artists, and the idea that there's always, you have to influence somebody who only gets to play 20 songs an hour,
right,
as to what those 20 songs are going to be, and you recognize the power of that stuff. But with all of that said, the ability to define the moment, to craft, you look at which music people had sex to, or which music, you know, and how they crafted the evening thing. It's tremendous power in influence, and I think that they never got, most of these guys never got celebrated for that. The Beatles got celebrated for it. Queen got celebrated for it, and all these acts got celebrated for being on the radio. But ultimately, they were chosen not necessarily by corporate entities, but really by individuals who got to figure out which albums they were going to play. And
which doesn't happen anymore.
Well, thank God that doesn't. Right now, we got satellite radio. It's like if you want to pick music with the DJ to make love to, you can go, oh, let's find Make Love station now. It's like, boom, and then you got special DJs on there.
But it's worse. I mean, at this point now, you have to ask yourself, how are you going to find the unknown artist? There's nobody out there.
Do you have satellite radio?
But satellite radio, I can go to the Bruce Springsteen channel.
Right.
And if I love, so how am I going to actually, I'm going to get a curated list, but I'm going to get 90% Springsteen.
Well, of course, because you're listening to the Bruce Springsteen channel.
Right, exactly. And that's sort of my point, which is that
it's distilled down.
It's distilled down. Yeah. It's somebody's actually, your algorithm is actually on purpose limiting your universe. And before, you couldn't do that. If you wanted to listen to Queen, you had to wait an hour,
right,
before Queen came back around.
But that's what made it special, right? Now,
it's what made it special.
Now we have Queen Radio.
Exactly, and I think that we miss, and it's one of the reasons why I tremendously embrace the playlists that are being created by YouTube and Spotify and others.
Oh, agreed.
Because I don't want to be hooked. I find that when I pick my artists,
right,
I'm actually picking the same artists over and over and over again. And granted, my list is a little bit different than the norm because I came from a singer-songwriter base. I know a lot of artists personally, who do not have millions of followers, who I think are better than the people with millions of followers in a lot of ways.
Right.
And I listen to them. But the great thing is that the algorithm then brings on all of these others with them. And it's the closest thing I can get to the fact that, at least it's a mathematically curated list of things I might like.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying. Like, terrestrial radio today is a farce because
We don't listen to terrestrial radio.
because
Most Americans do.
a lot of Americans do, but it's a farce because, yes, there were laws put in place to prevent payola when that became a big issue and da-da-da-da-da. But the reality is that it still exists in a different form, and that is that radio stations will not play your music. Like, they may play, like, let's say you're an artist who this radio station falls into this radio station genre. They will play your song once. And then if you want it played more than that, you have to buy ad time equal to the running time of your song. That's how they get paid for it now.
Well, granted, but it's not, at least it's not universal. But to go back to, there was an amazing book called The Future of Music back, I don't know, 20 years ago at least. And it predicted something called bundling. And at the time when I first read it, I was an entertainment lawyer, and I didn't necessarily believe everything that came out of this book. But what it predicted was that the angle really was that even in a world of the internet where there was going to be a broadening of rights, no one can stop an artist from putting something on YouTube, from putting something in Spotify and iTunes and everywhere, and Amazon, everywhere. That ultimately, though, the selection process was going to happen because there was going to be too much stuff. And the argument was that the solution used to be curating, and now it was going to be bundling, which meant that at some point there was going to be an interest in the person who was booking the show, who also happened to have a relationship with the record label, who also happened to have a relationship with the movie studio, and was going to bring them all along together. And that is our enemy. To me, it's the bundling of rights that the Super Bowl, the people who are producing the Super Bowl get to pick from their record label. That to me is.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I mean, you talked a moment ago about the advent of satellite radio,
Right.
And yes, satellite radio, for me, is far and away the biggest area that I consume music with right now. I have one in my car, and I will listen to it.
They still have the DJs, and they celebrate.
And I don't really even care about the DJs or anything.
I do,
because I do not pick a channel because of the DJ. I pick a channel because of the genre.
That's right.
And
That's right.
So I will listen to Ozzy's Boneyard, or I will listen to the Underground Garage because I like that kind of music. Will I listen to, pop hits or the number ones channel right now? No, probably not, because I'm just not into that kind of music.
Right.
Which means I'm not going to get exposed to it that way. However, picking up on what you said, YouTube is a powerful tool for my musical exploration, because I'll be sitting there at my computer and going, gee, I want to listen to, insert name of song here that I'm familiar with. And I'll look it up and I'll hit play, and it'll be part of some playlist. It'll be the first one on this playlist. And then I'll end up letting the playlist go, and suddenly I'll go, what's that? I've never heard that before,
Yeah, I do think that one of the things that we're missing, and it's to your point, and now I think we can pivot toward Casey Kasem and the rest of the story.
Yeah, I love that show.
Now you're talking about the other ways we were exposed to amazing content, which was that Casey had an ability to tell stories and would round out the context in which stuff was happening. It wasn't just...
That's true.
It wasn't just the top 40. And it was Paul, what's his name, for the rest of the story. What was
his last name?
I'm
You
sorry,
remember that show, The Rest of the Story?
No.
This guy, his name was Paul. I remember that, and he would tell these stories about some celebrity or something famous that happened, and then he would tell you the backstory of it, and he'd say, and that is the rest of the story.
Yes, and his name was
Yeah.
Paul Harvey.
Paul Harvey. Thank you.
Right, and that's what we lost the personality of it. That we might get, you might pick World Cafe satellite radio, But you don't have the rest of the story. You don't have Casey Kasem. You don't have, a lot of ways now you're picking the curated list.
Right.
But we've lost the personality. And I hope that is the part that can come back. So I don't know how that part can come back.
I think that you're right for the most part, but I think picking up on what Sean said a moment ago, there are certain stations that really do revel in that. I mentioned a moment ago Little Steven's Underground Garage. There's, I don't know, maybe half a dozen DJs on there, and a lot of them are people who are in bands that get played on that station, but they are familiar with the genre to a very deep degree, and so they might mention. The thing I love about Underground Garage is that over the last few years, there's been a number of artists that I'd never heard of.
Right.
That suddenly they played, and I went, "Wow, that's cool."
See, and that's what I'm talking about. Because to me, DJs they celebrated personal things. They play things that we never heard before. Now, when you guys start talking about YouTube radio and stuff, it's algorithms through what that platform thinks that knows our personality, and we kind of like that. We're kind of lazy, and you know what I mean.
No, but it's not. The algorithm has nothing to do with what YouTube thinks. The
Well,
algorithm
no,
has
It's
everything to do.
entirely
just
basing
saying-
on what you're picking.
It
so.
has
Well,
everything to do with what
but
every
it's
single other
deciding on what
person likes.
it's kind of creating what you like through its own algorithm, right?
Sure, what it's doing is
But it's
it's watching what you like, and it's
Yeah.
watching what other people
Right.
who listen
But
to
if
this
you-
track that
yeah.
you listen to like,
But
and
if you're
thinking
gonna,
you might like
yeah,
it.
but if you're going to listen to a heavy metal station that's playing heavy metal, oh, cool, and then it's not going to throw a country song in there because it's not in the algorithm.
No, it will.
It will, though.
It 100% will. If there are other people who listen to that music that also maybe have listened to this other country band, YouTube will now know that and will say, wait a second, maybe you might also like. So
So is there someone telling you this, or is it just
No,
going to
that's
come
how-
on and you have to listen?
like
to
for
it?
example, okay, you remember on Ozzy's last album, he did songs with a bunch of different.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the best songs that were on that album, in my opinion, was the one he did with Post Malone. And Post Malone has his foot kind of in two camps.
Actually, that was the album before the last.
Whatever. There's a lot of crossover into country with Post Malone fans.
Yeah, I know.
And so the algorithm would look at that, and if you listen to Ozzy and you listen to the song he did with Post Malone,
Yeah.
it might say, wow, a lot of the people who listen to this Ozzy track with Post Malone also listen to Garth Brooks or something,
Right.
Maybe Sean would like that, and it brings it up into
It'll
your
just play it, right?
Yeah,
But I'm talking about someone talking about it, going, "Hey, you know what? I think, this has kind of got a country twang on it. We're going to inspire this from Ozzy's album with Post Malone. What do you think of this?" The computer would just decide, right? It will just play the next, and you would have to.
It would decide based on your input.
on
and
what
everybody
you-
it thinks like you.
Yeah, and everybody
It's
who
not.
thinks like
It's
you.
it's using some thought to say there's a likelihood that you may like this other song too, because so many other people who like this first song do.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I think that's great. And it's dangerous to say, well, woe is us, the DJ is gone, or satellite radio. I think what the part that is nostalgic to me is really the stuff between the songs.
I agree.
Because a lot of these algorithms, a lot of the other people who listen to music and like music, a lot of these they're very, very good at coming up with some of these curated lists. Mathematically, it's more reliable than a DJ who's coming up with 20 songs, or maybe they were paid to pick and choose, or maybe they just met those people and wanted to give them a chance, or any one of the million reasons why DJs pick music.
Right.
Because it's psychological. And so I appreciate all that, and I'm grateful for that. I'm also very grateful that if you look back through history, people who are older, not teenagers or young 20s, tend to listen to the same music at 60 and 70 as they did when they were young.
Absolutely.
And that is now at least something that is that is a mold that is breaking, and I very much appreciate that. That you're able to just listen to Billy Joel if you're a Billy Joel guy, but
Right.
now
Well,
You know,
I think that's the point with technology being what it is now. We have so many different avenues. Like you mentioned earlier in this conversation, you know, if you wanted to hear a Queen song back when it was all terrestrial radio, you might have to sit there and wait for a few hours and just listen.
Right.
Whereas
Or call it up and request and hope they play it.
exactly,
And
but now
and
I can go to YouTube and go Bohemian Rhapsody, poof,
Right.
and I'm playing it.
It takes the fun out of everything.
But at the same time, talking about DJs and their influence on my musical taste, I'm going to again reiterate my opinion about Little Steven's Underground Garage. Now, Little Steven, guitar player for Bruce Springsteen's band, but he is very, very knowledgeable about underground music. And over the years of me
he likes
listening,
to throw some history in there.
He does.
even if it's not music.
and he's
related.
also knows
He's
so
like the
many
history
people
teacher of music.
that he's going to tell you interesting anecdotes about his encounters with these people.
Right.
But knowing Little Steven and what his musical taste is, and having heard what he's playing on his station and what he likes, I'm apt to give anything new that he kind of puts his weight behind a chance.
Right.
Whereas YouTube, you know, more often than not, if I play a song and I won't let the playlist continue, I'll move on to the next song that maybe I was inspired to listen to because of that track. That being said, we have so many different avenues that we can explore.
Right.
Depending on what you want. If you want to sit down and listen to just Billy Joel,
That's
go to
awesome.
Billy Joel
Yeah.
Radio. I think that's awesome.
But can we all agree that it's, I mean, both, you know, streaming and, you know, the voice of DJs are still important in our lives, I think. You know?
Important? I wouldn't go as far as that. I think that they were much more important in the past because my point being, we have so many avenues now to explore.
Well, I disagree because I think DJs to me are really important. Like they still play a big part of my life. They still introduce me to new music. They still talk about things that I would never know that this guitar player played on this album. And do you know that he was a country guitarist before he was a, you know, all those stories. And those still pop out.
I will admit that I have learned new songs from the DJs that I listen to.
Yeah.
I think that far more of the quote new music unquote that I listen to, I got from people like you two. You know, where you'd say, "Have you heard?
Yeah.
You know, insert name of song here. You should really check it out." You know.
Yeah, and I think that's right, and I think that that's what the algorithm also helps with, at least because it's sort of a virtual way of saying,
It
"Have you
is.
heard?" And it has introduced me to tons of stuff. I miss the old days because I used to sit there and wait for my song,
Sure.
with ready to push record on my cassette player.
Yes, I've done that.
You know, but yeah, I mean, music's going to evolve. The world's going to evolve, and we're going to get some things that we didn't get, which is an unlimited selection, and we're going to lose some stuff, and so I think that pretty much kind of wraps it up. For, you know, in a sense, for me, it's just kind of where we are, and I'm glad that there are still radio stations out there, and you know, over 6,000 AM radio stations out there pushing content, and FM is doing its thing. And
Yeah, I mean, I guess the final comment I'll make on that is that, while I hear what you're saying about the influence of a DJ,
Yeah.
for example, if there was a DJ who I really liked, but he or she was working on, say, a country music station, which is not a genre that I tend to listen to, I wouldn't go start listening to that channel just because of the DJ. You know what I'm saying? But that being said, I do find it entertaining when I listen to like Little Steven's Underground Garage to have those people chime in and talk about that sort of thing. But would I not listen to that music without them? Then I think the answer is no. I mean, they're like the cherry on top of the sundae. I like them and they add to the whole thing, but it wouldn't if they weren't there, it wouldn't destroy my love of music. So
I'm just addicted to that kind of thing. I'm not a algorithm type of guy.
Fair enough.
You know, that's why I was bringing up this topic, because it was kind
Yeah,
of.
I don't share your nostalgia just because it's not something I grew up with.
Yeah.
I was just voracious for music, and I would get it from wherever.
Yeah. They're
wherever
still
I
like
could get.
teachers to me.
I mean, you're an algorithm guy, like it or not. Just whether or not a person was helping serve it up.
Oh, okay.
But
I guess that's the world we're coming to. So, but yeah.
Well, thanks very much for checking it out. Please leave your comments below. We love reading them. Tell us anything that you want to say about this episode or what you'd like us to talk about in the future. And until next time, stay safe.